All right, welcome back, members. So before I get to the weaving, I want to talk about how these frames all start. Just like in the Wrap-A-Lot pendants from last month, the oddly shapes and curly frames, we start with a base frame like this for the strip weave pendants as well. All right, we select our stones, shape the frame to the stone, making sure that we have a little bit of space, 1 or 2 millimeter all the way around the stone. We plan to see if we want a second stone even, right? Or not, because we can flip wire clear over that. So just like in the other Wrap-A-Lot frames, we use these wires down here to flip back up and make curly wire, thick design on top, right? So that would be, this piece here, this thick wire here. So that's how we have the thick wire already on the frame ready for us to use. We get the rest of these little design wires down here from the weaved strips that we put onto the frame. When we went into the weaving video, there was bare wire on both sides of the weave. Some of that is so that you can add it onto the frame. Some of that is also so you can flip it back up for design. Right? So just to give you an idea of what goes on. So I like to set up several of these frames if I'm going to do these pendants, like all things. So some of you members who are in here and have told me you want to go from hobby to market or getting ready for show, you do these frames several at a time, and then you have the option to do the Wrap-A-Lot. This is last month's Wrap-A-Lot. We did it with a rectangle, but here's a big flashy round labradorite that I did a Wrap-A-Lot frame. The base frame starts out the same. We just did curly bare wire all the way around instead of weaved wire. Okay, so just so you know, you already have half the skill set here. So I'm going to select my stones. I'm going to shape my frame, making sure that I have space around all the stone. I'm going to hammer out my frames. And for strip weaving, I'm not going to wrap out my bail. All I did was just wrap the neck together. It doesn't have to even be that neat because we're going to fold over it and cover it all up. But I do this so that there isn't bulk on top of bulk. We're going to put weave on top of this, right? So you don't necessarily have to wrap it. You can wrap it in the traditional way like we normally do, and then add weave on top of that anyway. So that's up to you. But so this would be step one. I would get my frames and my stones to this point, and I would leave these wires straight down. That's also how we're going to attach weave strips. Then when I sit down to do my weaving, and this is why I show you this ahead of time, and we're going to go into weaving each of these patterns next. If I'm doing one pendant at a time, then clearly I can weave and size my weave to the pendant, right? But if I'm going to weave a bunch of these ahead of time, then what I usually like to do is, if I know that all of my stones are 1.5 inches to 2 inches, they're fairly large. These pendants finished are going to be 3 inches, right? So I'll go ahead and weave up enough to cover the base of my frame, the length of my frame. So from the point down there all the way to the bail right here, I just weave that length. I'm going to need more. If I curve it way out here, I'll need more weave to cover that. But I don't know which weave I'm going to use with which frame yet. So I'm just getting things ready. So I set my frames out, and then I start weaving. Okay, well, I need this one. I'll make 2 of these, one for the right side, one for the left side. And then I may weave up the secondary or decorative wires to this frame as well, what I call the smaller weaves. And I just pre-weave them to the length of my frames after I make them. And you know, if you are clever about it, you might leave an extra foot of weaving wire on here instead of cutting it off to a couple of inches. Leave yourself an extra foot, and that way if you have to add 3 or 4 sections, you just do it on the fly without adding a wire, right? So that's kind of how I plan for these. Some of them are smaller, some of them are larger, and I kind of get my weave wires ready for each of these frames. And there's lots of patterns of weave that you can do. I'm showing you a few here that are my favorites that I like to use because this is a real nice one to lay other wire over. It shows it off. It's also a nice one to lay bare wire over. It's a nice background weave for that. It's also just a beautiful, solid, elegant weave, right? It sits very well with almost, you know, any other style of weave. And it bends very nicely. So, let's see. So those are various. We're going to make all of these, and then we can also make what I call a spiked weave, and we're going to do this as well, which is this one here at the edge with the little spikes. I don't have a strip of that on hand, but I'm going to show you how to make one in the video soon, coming up after this little chit chat. So these are each, I make them 8 inches. You could probably go 6 inches, but I make them 8 inches for some comfort for my hands, and then just to give myself some options if I want to flip back and do designs. Certainly if these frames were smaller, I would go shorter on my wires, but you can start 6 to 8 inches. And the frame wires that I'm using here are 20 gauge round frame wires or base wires for the weave, and I'm using 28 gauge weaving wire. And for my base frames, I like to use 16 gauge for these larger stones, or you could even use 18 gauge. You know, it's a little bit smaller, but it would be sturdy enough once you hammered it all out. Okay. It has to be sturdy enough to hold onto your big rock, and also to add these strips to, right? So I wouldn't make this out of 22 or 20 gauge, because then once I try to tie on wire, big strips, you know, the frame will distort. So 16 or 18 gauge here, 20 or 22 gauge for your weave bases or your weave frame wires, you know, the base wires here. And then 28 gauge is what I like to use for the weaving. So the first weave we're going to do is this little spiked weave, this little decorative spiked weave along the edge of the pendant. Let me get a different pendant so you can see it a little better. This little one. All right. We could do that by using 3 base wires, and I have 3 20 gauge round soft copper wires. They're all cut to 8 inches long. I have this taped at 3 inches, and I'm going to weave 3 inches of wire. So I'll just start at the bottom base wire and insert my weaving wire. I'll give myself a leading couple of inches here, and I'm going to make 5 single coils on this bottom wire to get started. Okay. I'm just going to watch the spacing in between each of my base wires and make sure to keep them consistent as I can and not crush these 3 base wires together as I work. So I've made 5 single wraps. Now I'm going to jump up with my weaving wire, and I'm going to come completely over wires 1 and 2, Come back down. Come back down so that you don't have a bubble in the back, but not so tight that you crush this space out, okay? And then go all the way up, go all the way over all 3 base wires. And I'm just using the back of the pad of my finger here as a pad for my wires as I work. Then I'll come back up and go over 2 base wires, and then I'll do 5 single wraps on this bottom frame wire. I just push them together like that. And that's a segment, one segment. I'll take my nylon jaw and just give it a tap. And it's kind of like I've got a little peak in between the 2 5 coils there. So let me adjust my camera here so you can see it a little better. All right. So to repeat, I've done 5 single coils. Now I'll go up. I'll go completely around the first 2 base wires. I'll go up, go completely around all 3 base wires, up, go around 2 base wires, and then now that I'm back down at the bottom, I'll do 5 single coils right here at the bottom and repeat this pattern. Okay, I'll go up after 5 single coils, go completely around 2 frame wires, then I'll go up, make a coil around all 3 frame wires, and then on my way back down, go up and go around 2 frame wires, and then I'll do 5 single coils on the lower frame wire. Okay, just like that. And after every couple of segments, I will take my nylon jaw and tap them nice and flat. All right? So you'll keep in this very same pattern for 3 inches, or for the distance that you need for your frame.
Just keep weaving nice and neat.
And as I'm weaving and my weave grows, I'm not crushing the wires that are behind my hand here. Remember that we want to relax our grip and not put too much pressure on our hands. Alright, so I kind of went off camera so that I could weave comfortably for my well-being. And I've got about 3 inches. I'm going to make a couple of more segments with the last bit of my weaving wire. And I'm going to end these peaks on 5 coils just so the wire doesn't unravel. So you start on 5 single coils and then you end them on 5 single coils. 4 and 5. That's pretty good there. I'm just going to leave this little bit on in case I need to make a couple more. So here I have a beautiful weave. I could use this just as it is, but to make that spiked weave, you remove the tape. I like to go ahead and cut away. Well, if you think you might need it, leave the little tails, so don't cut them away. But get the tape away, and then you'll just make sure that all your weave is nice and tight here, and then get a plier. Take the very top wire and pull it out. So just hold on to your weave, get a nice metal plier or even your nylon jaw, and just gently pull the wire out. Okay? And it gives you your spiked weave. And so this strip is ready to go to be added on to your beautiful frame. And you'll make 2 of these, one for each side if you want, okay? I've got a little piece of tape and I've taped them at about 3 inches here. And then I'm going to part them a little bit. And I'm going to slip my weaving wire, a leading inch of it, onto the first base wire. So this will be base wire 1, 2, and 3. And this is an overhanded weave. So let me adjust my camera so you can see. Hopefully that's good there. So I have my weaving wire on the spool and it's dangling just to my side here. So I have my weaving wire over here. I'm holding on to the leading 1 inch. I'm going to go over. I'm going to do a complete 360 around the second base wire, and then I'll come up and I'll do a complete 360 around the top base wire, and that'll take me all the way to the back. We've done this pattern in a lot of the tutorials. Let me get up a little closer. Right. So I'm at the very top. I'm going to come back down the stack, and from the back I'm going to come between wires 1 and 2 so that I can do a complete 360 around wire number 2. Keep colliding with my camera here, I'm sorry. And I'll do a complete 360 around wire number 3. Come back up. Now I'm at the front of the stack. I'll do a complete 360 around wire number 2. Come up and do a complete 360 around wire number 1, around wire number 3 I mean.